Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of West Coast Gridiron. I am your host, Jeff Freeman, and today I'm going to do a quick review on the CFP national title game between Indiana and Miami. Got a couple of interesting takes on my part. First of all, great game on both sides. Both teams played their hearts out. A lot of hard hits. First off, that's one thing I want to talk about. I want to give a kudos to that reffing crew. As far as like what I saw out of the first half and part of the second half, they did miss some things, and I'll cover some of that, but all in all, I felt like it was a very well officiated game. Like they called what needed to be called, but overall they let the players play, and that was what they were talking about with this Big Ten crew. It's like they let the players play. They let them hit Mendoza. They let them hit Carson Beck. I mean, obviously they did get the one personal foul, but that one was kind of hard not to call in the fourth quarter when the dude takes his head and puts it right in Carson Beck's chest. So that was a little hard not to call. But overall, they let the players play. They let the corners and the wide receivers duke it out. They let everybody kind of take care of their own thing, and they called only what kind of needed to be called. Now, one thing I did see that I thought was interesting, there was that 3rd and 7 in the fourth quarter, and Mendoza ends up throwing the back shoulder fade to, what was his name? Beckett. No, oh my goodness gracious. I am so sorry. I am blanking on his name. Becker, not Beckett. They ends up throwing that back shoulder fade to Becker, and they were showing highlights of it yesterday, and I'm sitting there watching it, and the left tackle from Indiana actually bobs his head right before the snap and twitches enough to where like his upper body moves to where like I've seen that called as offsides. Like he moves enough to where I'm like, they could have called that, but they let it go. So I'm like, okay, that could be one you could consider a miss because that was 3rd and 7. So if they call that, now it's 3rd and 12. And to be brutally honest, both teams did not fare very well on 3rd down whatsoever as far as how they were taking care of business. I mean, Indiana went 6 for 16. They did a little bit better. Miami went 3 for 11. So, I mean, they were basically just under, like, right around that 30% as far as their 3rd down. And Indiana was right around that 40%. So, Indiana won the 3rd down battle. Ultimately, though, Miami did better than Indiana majority of the game when it came to passing yards, total yards, rushing yards. Indiana got them a little bit, but yards per play, Miami was 6.5 yards per play. Indiana was 4.4. I feel like Carson Beck did as good or better, in my opinion, than Mendoza. Carson Beck, in my opinion, kind of raised his stock a little bit. Yeah, he threw a late pick. I get that. He was trying to force things down the field because he had to. They had a little bit less than a minute. I mean, again, neither team could really complete balls down the field vertically. Neither team was going to let the other team really complete big balls on the outside. They got some completions down the middle. They got some short completions down the middle that ended up for big gains. And like I said, Indiana mastered that back shoulder fade with Becker and Mendoza. Couldn't get going, or Surratt, excuse me. Either way, he couldn't get going whatsoever. They kind of held him in check as Miami did a very good job of holding him down. Again, it came over, in my opinion, to turnovers and some time of possession, but it ultimately came down to turnovers and mistakes. Indiana didn't make a lot of mistakes. They had a couple of offsides penalties, and then they had that personal foul penalty that extended the drive for Miami in the fourth. If they don't do that, I think Miami's punting game over a lot earlier. But ultimately, the amount of penalties on a couple of 3rd downs that Miami had, that hustle play where he's ended up grabbing the face mask, getting him a 1st down in that late 3rd, early 4th quarter to let Indiana continue their drive. Those things screwed up Miami. If Miami was going to win, they were going to have to play clean, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't play disciplined enough to do the small things right. They got a couple of there was a pass interference call early on in the 1st and 2nd quarter, but ultimately, I mean, Miami has to be happy about how they played, but also sitting back. If I'm Cristobal, I'm saying, oh my gosh, because I'm losing my 2 edge rushers, probably losing Carson Beck, probably losing 3 to 4 of my offensive linemen to the draft. So they're looking at almost a rebuild. He's going to have to hit the transfer portal hard. So I think ultimately Miami did what they needed to do. They were better at running the ball. They were better at passing the ball. They passed for 232 yards. Indiana only threw for 186, but that's because they got to run the ball like 30 some odd times. So, and I think early on, Miami's offensive coordinator made a mistake. I think it was either late in the first, early in the second. I believe it was when Indiana went up 10-0, you saw Miami come out and they threw the ball 3 times in a row and go 3 and out. That's an offensive coordinator getting worried, in my opinion, going, oh my gosh, we're down 10 points, so we need to make something happen. Again, as an OC for 2 years, I could see where that gets scary. But at the same time, it's like one of those things, that's where you got to have that poise. And you got to sit back and be like, no, we were running the ball for 4 yards a carry. Yeah, between the tackles, they couldn't do it. They had to run stretch. They had to do off-tackle runs. That's where Fletcher got his big run, was attacking off-tackle. So that was the big key there, is that they needed to attack the outside edge. And they needed to get Tony going. Once they got Malachi Tony going, then things opened up. So I think they kind of forgot about him. The offensive coordinator, or even the head coach, whoever it was, got a little worried when they were down 10-0 in the second quarter, and they got out of rhythm. They got out of what they were supposed to do. They forgot about their identity, and that slowed them down. Then in the third and fourth quarter, they remembered who they were. They threw the ball consistently, and they also made some checks, and they were attacking off tackle to get their runs and get everything taken care of. Again, ultimately, in my opinion, what screwed over Miami was not playing clean, too many penalties, and quite honestly, the punt. That punt block for a touchdown, like if you take that away, if they're able to punt the ball to Indiana and they were able to hold Indiana, let's just say if you take that one play away and the rest of the game plays out, it's Indiana that's trying to get at least a field goal because they're down 21-20. So when you look at it that way, if Miami's special teams does what it's supposed to do and just gets the ball off, and they make even if that personal protector just reaches out and shoves a little bit harder and hits that edge rusher and hits that rusher, it wasn't even a fully blocked punt. It was just basically making sure they kick the ball. And nobody's got to block me. I'm going to stick my hand out and block it. So if they do what they're supposed to do there and just get that guy's hand and shove him out a little bit farther, they're getting that punt off. And then if everything else plays out the same way, well, then it's Indiana now that's behind middle to late in the fourth. And now they got to make some decisions as far as, oh, goodness, we're down by 1 point. We got to at least get to a field goal. Now, do they do it? I mean, it's possible. It's possible they get to a field goal. But, I mean, their offense wasn't as dynamic as it was. I mean, again, they had to go to Becker with the back shoulder fades, and that was pretty much really all they could do passing game-wise in the second half. And, again, the first half, Miami was playing off. He was giving them those little hitches. He was giving them those little spot receiver catches. But then the second half, when they got Xavier back to play corner on Miami, you saw them kind of play a little bit tighter, a little bit closer. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, now they're not getting those easy throws anymore. And they had to resort to the back shoulder fades, which, again, I'll give Indiana credit on this. Miami couldn't stop it. And Becker came out of nowhere. I mean, in the first 4 or 5 games, like he wasn't doing anything. And then the CFP, he comes off and he's dynamite and he's clutch. So again, I see it as if Miami doesn't have those mistakes and they play clean, I think we're looking at a different story. And I think we're looking at either Indiana had to come from behind by 1 point, kick a field goal to win, or we're talking Miami's the national champs and they won 21-20. Either way, it's a good game. You're playing the what if, you're playing the Monday morning, or in this case, Wednesday morning quarterback for me, as far as decisions that were made. Again, ultimately, I look at Miami and they made too many mistakes penalty-wise. They made a mistake early on in the second quarter forgetting their identity and going 3 and out, throwing the ball 3 times in a row. And then they made the mistake on the special teams. And if any one of those things changes, if they play clean, if they don't get that pump block, if they stay true to their identity in the second quarter, maybe they're scoring early on in the second quarter, it's 10-7 at half or even 10-3 at half. Again, I think that tells a different story that puts Indiana in a different position. Ultimately, Miami made too many mistakes. Kudos to Indiana. Cignetti, greatest turnaround in the history of sports. I'm going to get on that bandwagon. I mean, the guy's a winner everywhere he's been, from JMU now to Indiana, and he's just been a winner. I mean, you could go back and look at his records. I mean, he's double-digit wins to single-digit losses for the most part at everywhere he's been. So, yeah, the guy's a winner. The guy knows how to turn around programs. And you're going to see people now try to copy his formula because just like the NFL, the NCAA, college football has become a copycat league. So everyone's going to look at, okay, what did he do? everyone's going to try and pull his assistants and try and copy exactly what he did. This guy was working in the transfer portal while he's in the CFP playoffs. I mean, he just found his quarterback from TCU because who ran almost as many RPOs as Indiana? TCU. What quarterback they just get? The quarterback from TCU. So he's setting himself up for long-term success in Indiana, and I think you're going to see teams try to emulate that and try to figure out ways to piggyback and pick some of those things off. Some are going to be able to do it, some aren't. Because again, you're going to have to figure out how to add your flavor. You can't just carbon copy people and just copy and paste. It doesn't work that way. Everyone's got different personalities. Everyone's got different scenarios and different culture builds and different philosophies and things they believe in, to where you can't just carbon copy somebody's culture, somebody's mentality, and say, hey, I'm going to take exactly what he did. I'm going to plug it in over here. It doesn't work that way. You got to be able to make it your own. So then that way players respond to it. If you're just going to be fake and try and carbon copy it, players are going to catch on to that and they're going to move on and leave you be. Again, so I think people are going to be trying to pick his assistants off. They're going to try and get his assistants to come to their place. They're going to, obviously, he's going to be the most like sought after head coach as far as, hey, man, how did you do this? Everyone's going to be trying to find if he's going to do clinics. Everyone's going to be trying to figure out if they can get any kind of tidbit of information from him so they can, again, emulate his process in the NIL, what his culture looks like, what his practices look like. How does he hire his assistants? How does he treat his assistants? I mean, everyone's going to be, he is now the new Nick Saban as of right now. I'm not saying he is prestigious as Nick Saban, but right now he's the greatest college football coach right now, based on the turnaround he did at Indiana, based on what he just did going 16-0, who he did it with, and how he did it. I mean, again, he didn't have a bunch of 5 stars. He didn't have a bunch of even 3 or 4 stars. He went to the NIL. He brought guys in from JMU, and he went and just won with a bunch of just guys that were, not highly recruited athletes, and he built them, made them tough, and built a culture around them. So again, Miami had more talent. There's no doubt about it. Miami had more talent and had the better talent. Indiana had the culture. That's as true as it gets, where hard work beats talent, true in and true out. Because again, the hard work and work ethic, the discipline that Indiana has shown all year long, was able to basically handle the blows from Miami's talent, and ultimately was able to go the full 10 rounds or the full 4 quarters, whatever kind of, metaphor you want to use, but they were able to go the distance and ultimately put themselves in a position to win. So again, this was the biggest kind of example of hard work beats talent. They were able to beat Oregon. They were able to beat Alabama. Oregon and Alabama are notorious for having 3, 4, and 5-star athletes because they're able to recruit, because again, Oregon's got the money. Oregon's got the Nike. Oregon's got all that. They got the flashy uniforms. They got the fun culture. They got all that. And again, I'll admit it. I picked Oregon to win. I thought Oregon, the way Dan Lanning had been doing things, I thought this was going to be his time. I thought they were going to be able to come back and make a better game out of it. I mean, good Lord, they got blown out. Dante Moore did not look good. Nothing looked good for Oregon in that rematch against Indiana. But, I mean, I think Dan Lanning will come back. Again, each year he's gotten better. So, again, he got bounced out the first round last year. This year he gets bounced out in the semifinals or in the quarterfinals. So I think next year you see him making it even farther, again, changing his things as far as changing what he does and making adjustments and being able to move forward. So I think you'll see a different Oregon again next year. But going back to Indiana, again, the things they did, discipline, hard work, the little details, the way their defense was, it seemed always in the right spot, no matter how much. I mean, they moved Malachi Tony around, and again, he didn't get loose until the second half. But at the same time, like, they kind of had him locked down. They had Fletcher locked down between the tackles. That offensive line didn't look as dominant as we thought that they were going to be early on. Again, they had to run a lot of off tackle. They had to attack the edge of Indiana to really get anything going because of that movement and that shell that Indiana was running, where they were keeping, 3 under and 4 deep. And they were like, no, you're not going to get as deep. You can throw all the things you want underneath, and we're going to come up and we're going to gang tackle. They did a fantastic job of that. They put pressure on Carson Beck. Again, both teams pressured the quarterback. Don't get me wrong. They were in Carson's face, and Miami was in Mendoza's face. So I think, again, both teams had a great defensive game plan. It was just Miami made a little more mistakes. Now, as far as what Indiana just did, like I said, what they did in the NIL, what they did with the athletes, who they did it with, now you're going to see smaller schools And I say that in a way like smaller schools we've never heard of. So now you're going to hear of teams like the Northwesterns, the UCLAs, the teams that necessarily you haven't heard of in a long time at the Pac-12, soon to be new revamped Pac-12, and the Big Ten, the Big 12, and all that. I think you're going to see those teams now try and emulate that process and be like, well, heck, if Indiana can do it, so can we. We just got to find the talent and we got to be able to build the culture the way they built it. And again, that's going to be the trick. Yeah, it all looks good on paper, but can you emulate and can you build that culture with your philosophy and get your players to buy in? I mean, so that's why it's like it looks really pretty. It looks like the shiny new toy, but it's going to be hard for teams to emulate that process that Cignetti did. You're going to have to find the staff that he has, and you're going to have a coach that kind of has that same philosophy that he has, and you're going to have to be able to get players to buy into that. So again, ultimately, awesome game. Like I said, Miami dominated in a majority when you look at the overview. When you look at the passing yards, again, Carson Beck 19 for 32, 232, 1 TD, 1 interception. Mendoza 16 to 27. Mark Fletcher 17 carries, 112 yards, 2 TDs. Kellyon Black 17 carries, 79 yards. Malachi Toney 10 receptions, 122 yards, 1 TD. Omar Cooper, which nobody talks about him. He had 5 receptions for 71 yards. He was kind of the consistent throughout all the game. Becker just came on late. But ultimately, again, when you look at that, like total yards, Miami 342. Passing yards, 232. Rushing yards, Indiana had them 131 to 110. Yards per play, Miami 6.5 to Indiana's 4.4. First downs, Miami 15, Indiana 20. Again, the third down, that's where they had them. They were both 100% on fourth. Miami went 1 for 1, Indiana went 2 for 2. Total plays, Indiana had them 72 to Miami's 53. Sacks allowed, Indiana allowed 3 sacks to Miami's 1. So Carson Beck was a little bit more better protected. Punts, Miami 6, Indiana 5. Penalties, again, this is where it got hurt, but this was also uncharacteristic of Indiana. Miami had 7 for 60 yards, and Indiana had 5 for 38. Fumbles lost, everyone was clean there, and then interceptions, obviously the one late. But then time of possession. Time of possession, Indiana had it for 35 and a half minutes, and then Miami only had it for 24 and a half minutes. So again, you look at it that way. Again, the time of possession, they were able to run the ball, keep the ball away. I really, truly believe that second quarter is what kind of really held Miami back. If they don't lose their identity and go 3 and out on 3 passes, if they don't give up that pump block, I think we're either talking it's a tie game going into the fourth, or Miami's up by 1 and the pressure's on Indiana. But again, that's all hypothetical. What if? That's just kind of what I look at it. Overall, Miami did play a better game as far as stat-wise goes. Indiana played a better total game as far as that goes. And again, that just goes with Cignetti's style. So we'll see what happens in the NIL. Everyone's talking now about the SEC, which I find this interesting. This is a stat line I think that no one's really looking at, and everyone's been talking about the SEC has been the dominant, and they have been dominant. Don't get me wrong. They were dominant since the late 2000s till now. And I would say the last 3-4 seasons. Obviously, since Alabama went out, Georgia kind of stepped in with Kirby Smart. And then again, you had LSU, then 2019. I do think Indiana is now in the conversation as far as one of the greatest teams of all time, as far as they had a overall better win percentage against top 10 teams. They beat 6 AP top 10 teams. I believe it was the LSU team beat 7, or Ohio State and Indiana beat 6 and LSU beat 7 back in that gauntlet with when all the SEC teams were ranked all the time. But I think the SEC they got some bias, obviously, from 2009 to now. Nick Saban built them up. But in all honesty, the SEC hasn't been the Premier League. The Premier League has always been the Big Ten. The Big Ten has 33 national titles to the SEC's 27. And then everybody else kind of fills in down there, between the Big 12, the ACC, and the Pac-12. But the Big Ten has 33. There's 19 between Ohio State and Michigan. So the Big Ten, to me, has always been the dominant conference in the NCAA. Just nobody talks about it because, again, everyone's just talking about the now, what have you done for me now kind of thing. And the SEC was the top dog from 2009 to 2000 and let's just say 21 basically, or 22. Because now you have 3 years in a row where a Big Ten team is one between Indiana, Ohio State, and now Michigan. So, again, I leave it as we say the SEC is the dominant conference, but that hasn't been the case through history. It's been the Big Ten for a very, very long time with 33 national titles. So I don't know. Again, I think that's media bias. I think that's poll bias and the AP bias and the BCS back when that was still going on. So I think overall, you look at like the Big Ten's always been the premier conference, period, end of story. But I think we got caught up in the now. We're like, oh, well, the SEC is beating everybody. Nick Saban's the greatest coach of all time, which again, at that time, yes. But historically, the Big Ten is the premier conference just based on how many national titles they have and based on the history between the two teams that, between the two of them, have 19 out of the 33 for that conference. So, again, I think we can now go back and say it's the Big Ten, it's the SEC. The Big Ten is the premier league, I think. Then you go to the SEC. But now we'll see a lot of C's here. We'll see how NIL and all these transfers now kick in. We'll see now if the ACC and the Big 12 and now the new Pac 12, which now has not 12 teams, but is building there. It's getting a lot more teams. We'll see if they can catch up. Or we'll see if the WAC or the Mountain West, can they get some NIL deals where they're getting some, not necessarily 3 and 4 and 5-star athletes, but they're just getting athletes to come in and step up and all of a sudden build a Indiana style team to where now all of a sudden they're competing and they're getting into the playoff and they're moving on. Now, the one thing I want to close on this before I head out, I don't necessarily think we need to move to a 16 or 24 team, anything else. I covered this a few weeks ago on how to fix the CFP playoff. I'm fine if you want to go 16. I'm fine if you want to go 24 like the FCS. I don't think you need to. Like I said, I just think the committee needs to have clear expectations and clear definitions of what constitutes being ranked. So I do think they should just be, hey, look, we're going to take strength of schedule, we're going to take head-to-head, and we're going to take overall record. Like, those are going to be the 3 things we're going to use. And then we'll go to point differential if there's like a tie and there's no head-to-head. Then we'll go and we'll get a little bit more minute and a little bit more like gray area, like delineations as far as how we're going to figure out who should be ranked where. But you go by strength of schedule, you go by head-to-head, you go by points, you go by all these different things. And you have to say that this is what we're doing. Number 1, we're going overall record. Number 2, we're going strength of schedule. Or you go vice versa. You go, number 1, we're going strength of schedule. Number 2, we're going overall record. Because you could have 2 teams that are 10-2, but one played an overall highly more tough strength of schedule than the other one. I mean, again, just take, for example, you had like a Texas that had the 9th or the 8th hardest strength of schedule, whereas in Ohio State had the 42nd hardest strength of schedule. I think it was like week 8 or 9 when you were comparing the two. So if they had the same schedule or if they had the same record, which they didn't, but again, let's just hypothetically say they did. Let's just say they were both, 10-2, but Ohio State's strength of schedule was 48th and Texas's was 8th. Well, now Texas is ranked higher than Ohio State. But if you come out and clearly say that, then you don't have to have all these weird bargaining things like with the MOA with Notre Dame, where if they're in the top 12, they're automatically in. Like, you don't have to have that if you say, hey, strength of record, strength of schedule, overall record, points, head-to-head, these are the 4 or 5 things that we're using, boom. Then you don't have to add 16. You don't have to have 24. You can keep it at 12 and be fine. Because let's be honest here, this game took place on Monday. Next year, it's going to be on my birthday on the 25th. So now we're bumping it back another week. So it's just getting crazy because, again, you got the transfer portal that opened up January 1st. Like, we got to get things – the NCAA has got to fix its schedule. And that's the last thing that I'm going to kind of end on there. Congrats to Indiana and Miami. Fantastic game. Congrats to Miami to run the table at the 10th seed and work their way all the way into a chance to win a natty. That's a fantastic story for them. I hope that builds for their culture moving on. Indiana, my goodness, Cignetti, again, right as of right now, he is the hottest coach in college football. He's the greatest coach in college football because that is the greatest turnaround ever from being the losingest college to now. Like, they've only lost 2 games under him, and one of those losses was the last loss was to Notre Dame. Sorry, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'm just throwing that out there. But their last loss was to Notre Dame. So all you haters out there. But anyway, again, congrats to Indiana. Congrats to Cignetti. Enjoy it. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the season, and I'm looking forward to see what happens with the NIL. And I want to see what kind of surprise team now is going to come out. We'll take a look at that in a few weeks and see how the NIL shakes up and who kind of won or lost there and who's got some things that they need to work on. We'll see if we can make some early predictions going into the summer. So remember, effort, discipline, execution. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been West Coast Gridiron. I've been your host, Jeff. Have a great day.